Hey guys, and today I really want to talk about a certain episode in Game of Thrones. The episode I believe actually killed the entire show and was probably the herald to the end of Game of Thrones as we know it. A warning sign that Game of Thrones was about to change and not in a way any of us wanted to. An episode that most of us think is probably one of the best episodes of the entire show, but looking back was a massive warning sign of what was to come. And that episode was the Battle of the Bastards. Wait, hang on, I have a point. Wait! So guys, hopefully you didn't all massively just hit the dislike button, leave an angry comment, and leave without ever hearing me out, because I actually have a really good point to this. Battle of the Bastards is considered to be one of the best episodes of Game of Thrones. In fact, on IMDb right now, it is a 9.9 out of 10 rating, and it was much revered as one of the best episodes of the show ever. But I couldn't help thinking when I was watching this episode that something about it was a little bit wrong. And I think the Battle of the Bastards as an episode really has some of the first indications of what Game of Thrones was going to end up turning into. And while this episode has great cinematography, possibly some of the best cinematography in all of Game of Thrones, some of the best audience payoff, and a lot of the big plot decisions, a lot of things that us as fans really crave from the show, I think you can see how some of the decisions that went into making this episode would eventually spiral on and grow to be some of the long-term decisions that we ended up hating in Season 8 and Season 7. So while without a doubt this is probably one of the best episodes of television and a great episode in and of itself, what it set up was a chain of events that led us to Season 7 and Season 8 being what they were. And so let's talk about why I think Battle of the Bastards is truly the episode that killed what Game of Thrones was. So the first thing about this is it is a very visually spectacular episode. So much is going on with so many amazing decisions. The cinematography in this episode is insane, and there's a glorious one-shot in this episode. A single take of Jon in this battle that is kind of breathtaking to be seen and almost incomparable to anything else in the show. But it's a very odd decision because the cinematography being what it is, it kind of loses sense of the plot. And what I mean by that is if you really pay attention to what's happening in the cinematography, you notice that a lot of it doesn't actually make sense. You see soldiers coming from the wrong direction, and basically armies appearing out of nowhere. In fact, the shield wall that Ramsay deploys at the end of the Battle of the Bastards doesn't actually come from anywhere. While the scenes in this are so well done, we have battle that's actually filmed to almost perfection. We have a lot of chaos and death. There's very little here in the sense of plot service. In fact, this whole battle starts off where Jon completely loses his head and decides to charge in after his brother, who he knows he can't save, and there's no hope in charging after him. In fact, he runs off into the middle of this battle with pretty much no ability or no logical battle strategy, and this is a thing that we'll see become more and more prevalent throughout later episodes of Game of Thrones, where things start to happen mostly to increase the visual spectacle of them and make even less sense further on. I'm talking about in Season 7 when we see a shot of Jaime falling into the abyss, and it doesn't make sense because if he fell that deep into a lake of water while wearing full armor, he should be dead. But luckily, the very next episode clarifies that it wasn't actually that deep of a lake and he was able to be fished out really simply. And this happens kind of constantly throughout later parts of the show where things are done purely for the visual entertainment of the shot as opposed to making any real sense. And then let's talk about the battle strategy that goes into the Battle of the Bastards. Now, Ramsay, to his credit, has a very smart strategy. He knows that the North is watching, and he needs to make an example of Jon Snow's little rebellion. But Jon, on the other hand, seems to go into this battle with almost no thought. He rushes in to save his brother that there's practically no chance of him actually being able to save, and in fact, he basically just gets his entire army killed. His army that had a viable strategy going into it, all the strategy is completely forgotten, and they basically run into a massacre. And while you can kind of understand this on the emotional side of Jon seeing his younger brother murdered in front of him, Jon is an extremely well-seasoned soldier. He's been in multiple conflicts north of the Wall since then, and has been appointed the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Someone who you'd expect to be able to keep his head in the face of danger, yet he completely forgets any sense of strategy in this fight.
I hope you're not thinking of doing anything stupid.
And while in this scene the writers did a good job of kind of explaining why this happened due to the emotional reasons, in later episodes of Game of Thrones, battle strategy being completely forgotten is very apparent, especially in the Battle of Winterfell or the Massacre at King's Landing, where soldiers seem to be doing absolutely nothing and there's no sense of strategy whatsoever, which breaks what's called the suspension of disbelief, because when fans watch these scenes and see armies behaving completely illogically, we can't help but think that this would never happen, which makes us realize that this is just a TV show and not actually something that would happen.
Your Grace, he's already destroyed a good portion of our fleet.
While Dany kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces.
Let's keep going and talk about what happens at the end of the battle too, where at the very end of the Battle of the Bastards, Jon fights Ramsay in one-on-one combat, which is something that really looked fun and was really good to see. And it really paid off towards the name of the episode itself, the Battle of the Bastards, Jon Snow versus Ramsay Bolton, formerly Ramsay Snow. And this battle raged on and truly showed that Jon defeated Ramsay and allowed him to take over. However, for no apparent reason, Jon decides not to kill Ramsay at the end of this fight. And immediately after watching it, you could rationalize this as Jon not wanting to kill someone in a battle. He wanted to take him prisoner. But this is almost immediately countermanded when Sansa actually just kills Ramsay in the next scene of the show. And while this is a huge payoff for the fans, it basically didn't make any sense. Why would Jon spare Ramsay's life only for him to be executed in private with no one watching, with no witnesses, just so Sansa could have a revenge? And it really feels like the reason why this was done was not for the characters in the show themselves, but for audience payoff. Because this is something the audience really wanted. And it was a very bad precedent to set. While it worked in this episode, it led to a precedent where things would happen in later episodes which were clearly done only for the benefits of the fans and made less and less sense within the logic of the show. I'm talking about the Clegane Bowl, I'm talking about Arya's sex scene, I'm talking about Bronn being promoted to the Lord of the Reach and the Master of Coin, despite the fact that he basically doesn't understand how lending money works.
A man of the world, you're strangely naive.
I've never borrowed money before. I'm not clear on the rules.
Well?
But all those being aside, all that, the biggest, by far sin that the Battle of Bastards committed against the legacy of Game of Thrones was plot armor. My god, the plot armor. Game of Thrones was probably beloved for one thing more than anything else, and that was the fact that it was not afraid to kill off major characters. It was not afraid to get the favorite character of so many fans and chop their head off right in front of you. This caused a sense of mortal dread to whenever we saw one of our favorite characters in danger. We actually feared for their lives because it was so likely that something horrible would actually happen to them.
Because anyone could die, the peril was real. And that's the feeling I want my readers to have, that if you're going to enter...
Fear is the feeling you want your readers to have. Yeah.
Yes, actually, in a word, if you're going to write about fearful situations, I want you to have fear, and the right kind of fear.
And yet, in Battle of the Bastards, Jon runs right into Ramsay's archers by himself. He's clearly in range of their archers as Ramsay killed his brother at that exact distance, and the arrows can easily hit him, and yet he's there, and the arrows just keep missing him for literally no good reason, as he's not even really defending himself from them. In fact, in many times in this scene, Jon really should die. He's horribly surrounded, he's completely outnumbered, and there's basically no good reason to why he's surviving. In fact, when the shield wall scene comes up, which is really cool and visually interesting, It's bizarre that Ramsay has suddenly chosen to stop firing arrows. He was completely willing to kill his own soldiers in order to make the corpse pile that he used for his strategy, but for some reason, when it's basically only his opponent's troops trapped in the middle, he suddenly stops firing arrows. It makes no sense, and even the scene where Jon actually invades Winterfell doesn't make sense because there are still guards on the turrets and walls of the castle. And those guards would have had to see Jon running by himself towards the castle and chose not to fire on him. In many ways, Jon should have absolutely died given how the battle appeared on film. And yet he doesn't, because he seems to be protected by a strong sense of plot armor. Not to mention a last-minute save thanks to Sansa. And this is really foreshadowing for what was to come, because in later episodes of Game of Thrones, these would be extremely apparent. Characters would be put in situations where there was absolutely no way to get them out of there, no logical way for them to survive it, and yet they somehow would. And this took the feeling that fans had, the feeling that fans loved about the show, where you really feared for characters' lives, and really threw it out the window, because in later episodes and seasons of Game of Thrones, we would see that characters would be put in perilous situations, and we wouldn't even have to worry about them, because obviously they're a main character and they're not really in danger, which is against the entire spirit of Game of Thrones that was not afraid to kill characters when they were put in peril. So guys, what can I say? This episode really felt good watching it when it came out, and led to episode 10, The Winds of Winter, which is probably also one of the greatest episodes of Game of Thrones. And yet, the feeling it left and the seeds that it sowed really did plant the way forward for the rest of the show. And the way it branched off because of this did not go in a great direction. And it could be seen that maybe if some slight changes had been done here, it could have stopped what ended up being really poor writing on the sense of Season 8.
I do need to kill a lot more of my point of view characters, because there have gotten to be an awful lot of them. But
maybe if the writers continued to do what they did in this episode, where they kept these events to happen sparingly and very rarely, it would have been fine. But the massive overuse of these flaws really seemed to hurt the quality of the later seasons of the show. But anyways guys, that's just what I think. Let me know if you disagree, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.